Chapter 58. He multiplies loaves and warns about leaven. Matthew 15:32 through 16:12 and Mark 8:1 through 21. Chapter Overview. Jesus feeds 4,000 men. He warns about the leaven of the Pharisees. Great crowds have flocked to Jesus in the region of the Decapolis on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. They have come to hear him and to be healed, bringing along large baskets or hampers of provisions. In time, however, Jesus tells his disciples, "I feel pity for the crowd, because they have already stayed with me for 3 days, and they have nothing to eat. If I send them off to their homes hungry, they will give out on the road, and some of them are from far away." The disciples ask, "From where will anyone get enough bread in this isolated place to satisfy these people?" Mark 8:2 through 4. Jesus responds, "How many loaves do you have?" The disciples say, 7 and a few small fish. Matthew 15:34. Then Jesus has the people recline on the ground. He takes the loaves and the fish, prays to God, and gives them to his disciples to distribute. Amazingly, all eat to satisfaction. The leftovers collected fill 7 large provision baskets, even though about 4,000 men as well as women and children have eaten. After Jesus sends the crowds away, he and the disciples cross by boat to Magadan on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Here, Pharisees, accompanied by some of the sect of the Sadducees, try to test Jesus, asking him to display a sign from heaven. Realizing what their motives are, Jesus replies, "When evening falls, you say, 'It will be fair weather, for the sky is fire red.' And in the morning, 'It will be wintry, rainy weather today, for the sky is fire red, but gloomy.' You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but the signs of the times you cannot interpret." Matthew 16:2 and 3. Then Jesus tells the Pharisees and Sadducees that no sign will be given them except the sign of Jonah. Jesus and his disciples get in a boat and head toward Bethsaida on the northeast shore of the sea. En route, the disciples discover that they forgot to bring enough bread. They have just 1 loaf. Having in mind his recent encounter with the Pharisees and the Sadducean supporters of Herod, Jesus warns, "Keep your eyes open. Look out for the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." The disciples mistakenly think that his mention of leaven refers to their forgetting to bring bread. Noting their mistake, Jesus says, "Why do you argue over your having no bread?" Mark 8:15 through 17. Jesus had recently provided bread for thousands of people, so the disciples should know that he is not concerned about a lack of literal loaves. "Do you not remember," he asks, "when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000 men, how many baskets full of fragments you collected?" They answer, 12. Continuing, Jesus says, "When I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000 men, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up?" They reply, 7. Mark 8:18 through 20. Jesus asks, "How is it you do not discern that I did not speak to you about bread?" He adds, "Watch out for the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Matthew 16:11. Finally, the disciples get the point. Leaven is used to cause fermentation and make bread rise. Jesus is here using leaven as a symbol of corruption. He is warning the disciples to be on guard against the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees, which has a corrupting effect. Matthew 16:12. Questions for review. Why do people flock to Jesus? When Jesus mentions leaven, what did the disciples mistakenly think? What does Jesus mean by the expression, "the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees"? Chapter 59. Who is the Son of Man? Matthew 16:13 through 27, Mark 8:22 through 38, and Luke 9:18 through 26. Chapter Overview. Jesus heals a blind man. Peter to receive keys of the kingdom. Jesus foretells his death and resurrection. Jesus and his disciples arrive at Bethsaida. The people then bring a blind man to him and beg Jesus to touch the man to heal him. Taking the man by the hand, Jesus leads him outside the village. After spitting on the man's eyes, Jesus asks him, "Do you see anything?" The man replies, "I see people, but they look like trees walking about." Mark 8:23 and 24. Laying his hands on the man's eyes, Jesus restores his sight. He then sends home the man who can now see clearly, instructing him not to enter into the village. Next, Jesus and his disciples travel northward to the region of Caesarea Philippi. It is a long ascent, covering about 25 miles. The village is at an elevation of 1,150 feet above sea level, with snow-capped Mount Hermon rising to the northeast. The trip probably takes a couple of days. At one point along the way, Jesus goes off to pray alone. Only about 9 or 10 months remain before his death, and Jesus is concerned about his disciples. Many have recently left off following him, and others apparently are confused or disappointed. They may be wondering why he rejected the people's efforts to make him king, or why he would not provide a sign to show unquestionably who he really is. When the disciples come to where he is praying, Jesus asks, "Who are men saying the Son of Man is?" They reply, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." Yes, people think that Jesus may actually be one of those men raised from the dead. To draw out their thinking, Jesus asks his disciples, "You, though, who do you say I am?" Peter quickly replies, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Matthew 16:13 through 16. Jesus says that Peter can be happy that God revealed this to him, adding, "I say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my congregation, and the gates of the grave will not overpower it." Jesus means that he himself will build a congregation, and that even the grave will not hold captive its members if they maintain a faithful course on earth. He promises Peter, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of the heavens." Matthew 16:18 and 19. Jesus does not give Peter first place among the apostles, nor does Jesus make him the foundation of the congregation. Jesus himself is the rock upon which his congregation will be built. Peter, though, is to receive 3 keys. He will have the privilege of opening, as it were, the opportunity for groups of people to enter the kingdom of the heavens. Peter would use the first key at Pentecost 33 CE, showing repentant Jews and proselytes what they must do to be saved. He would use the second to open to believing Samaritans the opportunity to enter God's kingdom. Then, in 36 CE, Peter would use the third to extend that opportunity to uncircumcised Gentiles, Cornelius and others. In this discussion, Jesus' apostles are troubled when he foretells the sufferings and death that he will soon face in Jerusalem. Not grasping that Jesus is to be resurrected to heavenly life, Peter takes him aside and rebukes him, saying, "Be kind to yourself, Lord. You will not have this happen to you at all." But Jesus turns his back and answers, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me because you think not God's thoughts, but those of men." Matthew 16:22 and 23. Jesus now calls others besides the apostles and explains that it will not be easy to be his follower. He says, "If anyone wants to come after me, let him disown himself and pick up his torture stake and keep following me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and for the sake of the good news will save it. Mark 8:34 and 35. Yes, to prove worthy of Jesus' favor, his followers must be courageous and self-sacrificing. Jesus states, "Whoever becomes ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Mark 8:38. Yes, when Jesus thus comes, he will repay each one according to his behavior. Matthew 16:27. Questions for review. What views do some people have as to Jesus' identity? How do the apostles view him? Peter receives what keys, and how are they to be used? What correction does Peter receive, and why? Chapter 60. The Transfiguration, a view of Christ in glory. Matthew 16:28 through 17:13, Mark 9:1 through 13, and Luke 9:27 through 36. Chapter Overview. Transfiguration Vision. Apostles hear God's voice. While Jesus is teaching the people in the region of Caesarea Philippi, which is about 15 miles from Mount Hermon, he makes a startling announcement to his apostles. "Truly I say to you that there are some of those standing here who will not taste death at all until first they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Matthew 16:28. The disciples must wonder what Jesus means. About a week later, he takes 3 of the apostles, Peter, James, and John, with him up to a lofty mountain. It may well be nighttime, for the 3 men are sleepy. While Jesus is praying, he is transfigured before them. The apostles see his face shine as the sun, and see his garments become brilliant as light, glitteringly white. Then 2 figures, identified as Moses and Elijah, appear. They start talking to Jesus about his departure that is to occur at Jerusalem. Luke 9:30 and 31. His departure evidently refers to Jesus' death and subsequent resurrection, which he recently spoke of. This conversation proves that, contrary to what Peter urged, Jesus' humiliating death is not something to be avoided. Fully awake now, the 3 apostles watch and listen in amazement. This is a vision, yet it appears so real that Peter begins to get personally involved in the scene, saying, "Rabbi, it is fine for us to be here. So let us erect 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Mark 9:5. Does Peter want the tents set up so that the vision will be prolonged for some time? While Peter is speaking, a bright cloud covers them, and a voice from the cloud says, "This is my Son, the beloved, whom I have approved. Listen to him." At hearing God's voice, the frightened apostles fall on their faces. But Jesus urges them, "Get up, have no fear." Matthew 17:5 through 7. When they do, the 3 apostles see no one except Jesus. The vision has ended.
Hey guys, it's Brent. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and like this video.